Being a mother sometimes requires you to do things you don't want to do, but I've never liked shopping late at night, particularly when you discover the morning bustle won't wait for a grocery run and your kid runs out of formula at 11:30 at night. It was just another night. Peaceful home, sleeping infant, and hubby playing video games in the living room. It would only take 10 minutes, I assured myself. I picked up my keys and called, "Be right back," simply grabbing the formula. "If something seems strange, text me," my spouse remarked, hardly taking his eyes off his screen. I didn't realize how much I'd wish I had, so I only half smiled. Clearwater Supercenter, the nearest Walmart, is just a 5-minute drive away. It's in a community that seems to be a blend of military families like ours, and the type of residents that never leave, not voluntarily, but because of their cycle. Some people are familiar and friendly. Some people simply don't feel right. You are aware of the type. Nights a bit too long, eyes a bit too wide, and movements a bit too abrupt. However, I drove by 2 vehicles parked nose to nose with their drivers sitting there staring blankly ahead, and entered the dimly illuminated parking lot. There was silence. Aside from the buzzing of the overhead lights that flickered like something from a bad horror movie, it could be too silent. The store was completely quiet inside. The only people wandering the aisles were the night shift employees and a few late-night lingerers, a mother in the cereal aisle with 2 yelling toddlers, an obviously intoxicated teen gazing at frozen pizza, an old man murmuring to himself close to the drugstore. I made a beeline for the baby aisle. It's located across from the pet food and close to the back, past the cleaning supplies. It was well known. It was secure. Then I noticed the clothing. Soft pink with small flower buttons and ruffled sleeves. I picked it up with a smile on my face, seeing my daughter stumbling around in it. Even though it's silly, small things like that make the fatigue seem worthwhile. I sensed it at that moment. Just a presence without a word or sound, the distinct sense that someone is observing. The hair on my arms stood up and my flesh pricked. I made a small turn and saw him. Halfway down the aisle, a man who was at least my height, if not somewhat taller, was standing there and looking at me. I initially believed he may be an employee. No trolley, no vest, just him, motionless. He had stringy hair that hung beyond his chin and was emaciated and pale, possibly in his late 30s or early 40s. It appeared as though his clothing had not been washed in weeks or even months. There was a slight sour smell of booze and perspiration between us. I gave a strange, apprehensive laugh. "I think these baby clothing are too adorable." No response. The same expressionless look. His lips curled into a sneer as if he knew something I didn't. I went cold. That's the danger factor. Your body is more aware than your mind. Despite my every instinct telling me to get out, I remained still for far too long. I muttered that I needed power and formula, turned left and walked away. A stupid thing to do. I wasn't thinking straight, so I should have gone to the front of the store. I found myself next to the soda section and picked up a 12-pack of Coke. Zero, clumsily balancing it with the formula can. No cart has been stolen by me. All I had to do was get out. I heard it as I turned back toward the front registers. The footsteps behind me, a gentle shuff-shuff. Just following, neither fast nor slow. I looked back. He was the one. He followed me exactly, behind me by maybe 20 feet. When we met, his gaze never left mine, as if to challenge me, to let me know he wasn't finished yet. I clenched my jaw and made my way to the line with 10 or fewer goods. He lined up behind me. Before he slackly picked up a Snickers bar from the rack and threw it onto the belt behind my belongings, he had no cart, no basket, and no goods. As if nothing were wrong, the cashier, a teenage girl with fading purple hair and the name tag that read Tay, greeted me. I tried to grin, but I could hear my heart thumping in my ears. Then I detected his scent. I was assaulted hard by the foul smell of beer and body odor. Trying not to gag, I made a small step toward the woman in front of me. He too stepped forward. I sensed a gentle touch on my butt and left cheek. The body became rigid. I looked over at him. "Hey," I responded sternly, maintaining a firm, yet low voice. He averted his gaze and mumbled something I couldn't understand. He still had his hand suspiciously near his crotch. That repulsive sneer is still there. I tried to ignore the fact that my palms were already moist with perspiration as I turned around. This time squeezed my right cheek. Hard. This time I let out a gasp and whirled around. "Stop touching my ass, please." There was silence on the line. Halfway through scanning the Coke Zero, Tay froze. With wide eyes, the woman in front of me turned. "Is something wrong?" Evidently uncertain, the cashier inquired. With a trembling voice, I nodded. "Yes, this individual. I was recently grabbed twice by him. He is unknown to me. Since the baby aisle, he has been following me." The man appeared bored, unfrightened, and unashamed. After hesitating, Tay said, "Sir, I need you to step back or I'll have to call security." He only gazed at me as if I had kicked his dog without moving. Even as I turned to pay, I could feel the weight of that glare. With trembling palms, I swiped my card and almost dropped my wallet. I pulled it off the counter before Tay had even finished bagging my belongings. I didn't run, not quite yet. "Walk," I told myself. "Be calm. Don't be afraid." Before I heard the doors behind me swing open, I had already taken 10 steps into the parking lot. I didn't check. I was aware. I ran. 2 rows over was my automobile. My fingers slipped as I fumbled my keys out. I could hear footsteps slapping faster behind me. I pressed unlock and ran to the car. Heavy breathing and grunts. Approaching. I slammed the door behind me after yanking it open and diving inside. Prior to even bang, "Start the engine," he shouted, something incomprehensible as he slammed upon the bonnet of my car, his face contorted in anger. I let out a scream, twisted the key, floored it, and put it into reverse without checking. He rolled after flying off the hood and hitting the pavement with force. I didn't give a damn. I took the wheel. It wasn't until I was in my driveway, trembling so violently that I could hardly shift into park, that I stopped. My heart was pounding when I staggered into the house. When he saw my expression, my husband leaped to his feet. "What happened?" Between sobs, I told him everything. He desired to return. He was enraged, claimed he ought to have accompanied me. All I wanted to do was curl up into a ball, lock every door, and close every blind. Why me? I kept asking myself. What was it he desired? Was it merely to frighten me? Was he plotting something worse, or was he just getting a twisted thrill? Perhaps he believed I would be an easy target after seeing a woman alone herself. And perhaps I was. I failed to submit a report I ought to have. However, after living close to towns like Clearwater for a long time, you begin to believe that nothing will change despite reporting. The man would disappear, prior to even seeing the video, if they looked at all. I now keep a knife in the glove compartment, a mace on my keychain, and a stun gun in my diaper bag, and I never return to that store by myself at night. I still occasionally see that face, that smirk, that dead stare in my dreams. I sometimes question whether I would have ever made it home if I had walked more slowly, or if I had paused for just 5 more seconds. Mostly, though, I'm curious about how many other ladies didn't. How many, I wonder? I was never anxious about going out by myself. Even though I live in a big, bustling city with lots of activity and people all around, I always felt rather safe, especially during the day. I've been wandering alone for a time now. I'm 16 years old. Everything is close by where we reside, which is a good place. There are 3 supermarkets within 5 minutes, including a Walmart that I frequently go to for beauty care products, school supplies, and, to be honest, just to get out of the house and walk around. Up until that Sunday, everything had felt safe, familiar, and normal. Afternoon. My younger brother was playing baseball with his team that day, while both of my parents were at work. I stayed at home to do some laundry and finish some schoolwork. Approximately 2 p.m., I became aware that I needed some school supplies. I need some body wash and a new ID lanyard. Every student at my school is required to wear their ID around their necks, and on Friday, mine broke in 2. Not a huge deal. I assumed I would simply make my usual run to Walmart. I didn't even consider telling anyone that I was leaving. I put on trousers and a hoodie, pulled my hair up in an untidy bun, got some cash, and made the 10-minute walk to Walmart. I wasn't rushing. I even grabbed a Coke at a nearby convenience store and drank it while listening to music through an earpiece. The sun remained high. People were shopping. There were children present. It seemed to be just another day. I went directly to the area with office and school supplies inside. They often kept the lanyards close to all of the pencil and pen cases there. I noticed a man standing at the end of the aisle while I was leisurely perusing the shelves. He had the appearance of someone's grandfather. He was dressed in jeans, a brown t-shirt, a pair of spectacles dangling from his collar, and a somewhat disheveled gray beard. He was in his mid to early 60s, average height. There was nothing immediately striking about him. As I went by, he grinned and said, "Hey there." I returned the courteous grin. "Hello." "What a lovely day," he said. "Yes, it is," I answered, already shifting my attention back to the lanyard rack. He continued to smile as he said, "Just doing some shopping." "Me too," I muttered, and walked a bit further down the aisle. I didn't give it much thought. Sometimes people talk. His statement that he was shopping seemed a little strange, as if he had to justify his presence. However, I dismissed it. After selecting a simple black lanyard, I made my way to the personal care area to pick up body wash. I saw him again, the same man, about 5 minutes later, as I was standing in the soap aisle comparing products. This time he simply passed, slowly and steadily made eye contact and grinned once more without saying anything. As he went by, I could feel his eyes on me, even though I was pretending to be genuinely interested in reading the label on a bottle of Dove. My stomach fell. This time, I have no idea how to describe it. He hadn't taken any action. Not really, but his gaze made me feel like a target, and there was something about it that made my skin crawl. I looked around. The aisle was crowded with other people. A girl my age was examining deodorant, and an elderly woman was selecting up shampoo. I maintained my composure. I had learned to have faith in my intuition, and there was something off about this. I took out my phone and sent Maya, my best friend, a text. "Hey, I think I'm being followed by a guy in Walmart. I feel so strange, but maybe I'm just hallucinating." She immediately responded, "You're where?" "I'll continue to talk. Stay in the store." I moved to the face cleanser and moisturizer aisles, trying not to draw attention to myself. I strolled slowly. Perhaps it's simply a coincidence, I thought. It's possible that he also needs soap. Perhaps I'm overly suspicious. However, he was once again there when I turned the corner at the end of the aisle. He merely stood there waiting this time. He said, "Pardon me, young lady, young." My grip on my shopping basket tightened as I froze. "Yeah. Could I just say a few words quickly?" He sounded like he was trying to sound sweet when he inquired in this strange, syrupy tone. "Sure, you're very beautiful." My stomach turned over. My heart began to thumping. I hurriedly said, "Thank you," trying to edging away with a tense half-smile. "Are you married?" I blinked. I wore a hoodie when I was 16, as well as jeans. Just running errands, no makeup, no cutesy attempts. I certainly didn't appear to be married. "No," I answered, attempting to dismiss it with a laugh. "I'm in high school," he responded with a laugh. His response was, "Me neither," and before he added, there was this terrible stillness. "Got a boyfriend?" My throat constricted. Something inside of me begged me not to say no, but I didn't. I said a falsehood. "Yes, I do." A pause occurred. He seemed to be examining my face to determine whether or not I was telling the truth. Then another boy, perhaps 17 or 18, with a hoodie, pants, and untidy hair, came over. He had been in the adjacent cologne aisle. "Yeah, she's with me," he remarked as he moved up beside me. He gave me a glance and grinned like he placed himself directly between me and the man when we were together. The man's grin wavered. He answered, clumsily, his eyes slipping away, "Oh, I figured. Good luck to you both then." He turned and left. Swiftly around the turn and out of the aisle. For a moment I gazed at the teenager, my eyes wide. "Thank you," I said in a whisper. He grinned once more, but more subtly. "I observed the manner in which he addressed you. I just wanted to check in with you." Together, we made our way to the front. While we were waiting in line, he spoke sparingly about the weather and school. He walked away after waiting for me to pay. I went to the doors. "Be safe," he then urged. "Okay," and waved to me briefly before making his way to the parking. Hotel. I stood in front of the doors and looked around the parking lot. The man was nowhere to be seen. I took a different path home, though. I waited until I was on my own street before putting my earbuds back in, stayed close to busier streets, and occasionally looked behind me. I didn't see him. Never heard anything more, once more. However, I will always remember that expression on his face. What his aims were, I don't know. I'd rather not know. Perhaps the conversation would have been more eerie. Perhaps not. But I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. Then to the man who asked me whether I was married, then followed me around Walmart, grinning as if he had something planned. We must never cross paths again. I never imagined that working nights would alter my perception of vacant areas, particularly those that I used to think of as just aisles and merchandise. The hum of fluorescent lights, cereal shelves, and hoodie racks. However, I no longer feel at ease when I go by a well-lit, quiet establishment after dark. I feel like I'm being watched. This began in 2019, shortly after I relocated to a more tranquil area of Westfield, Ohio, from a tiny town outside of Tulsa. At the time, I was 24 years old and had just been let go from a manufacturing job that abruptly downsized. I needed a job badly. I had no family nearby and the rent was past due. I therefore jumped at the chance to work as an overnight merchandiser at a 24-hour Walmart. Although it wasn't glamorous, the pay was good for the amount of work. More significantly, it included a guarantee of standard, easy work. Simply unload, inventory, organize goods, and keep out of the way. They welcomed me to the squad, gave me a box cutter, and gave me a blue vest. After 3 weeks, the environment already felt strange, even though I had promised myself I would only be there for a few months. The work itself wasn't the problem. It was a good job. I worked calm shifts from 1000 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I frequently spent hours by myself in one area. The work was monotonous. Check inventories, place objects, and open boxes. I could often relax and let my body take care of itself, while my thoughts wandered. But then the sounds began. Little things that are too subtle for most people to notice, not loud ones. Unless it's quiet at 3 a.m, and the only person in the clothes area is you. It seems like every small watercourse is right next to you. It was pulling at first, then tapping, a gentle shuffle above. At first, I blamed it on rodents. I told myself old buildings creak. However, this Walmart wasn't an old one. It was constructed in 2013. I mentioned it once when we were on break. 5 of us worked night shifts. I was accompanied by 2 floor supervisors, Marcus and Trina, a stalker named Deshawn, and Lacey, a cashier who handled backstage paperwork. "You hear that shut too?" With wide eyes, Deshawn inquired. He was halfway through a ham sandwich and leaned in closer like he was about to tell a ghost story. The words, "I thought it was just me," I said. The 2 managers, Trina being the older, shrugged, particularly after snowfall, the attic cax, expansion, and contraction. Confused, I responded, "It's August." She didn't respond. The loft. The access was close to the break room, but I had never been up there. Only a hatch built into the ceiling, and a metal ladder. Kenny, the maintenance man, was the only person I had ever seen open it. I recall this because he refused to discuss his reason for being up there, and was covered in perspiration afterwards. When I asked once, he whispered, "Don't go up there. It's not worth it." About 6 weeks in, the true turning point occurred. Thursday night was slow. I was given the task of handling frozen foods, which often took 2 hours. About 2:15 a.m., I was loading packages of mixed veggies and peas into the standing freezers on aisle 18. The whole aisle was dark. Since I first started, some of the lights had been flickering, and I had grown accustomed to operating in partial darkness. I turned around and froze after shutting the freezer door. Near the frozen pizzas at the far end of the aisle, someone was crouching. I did not hear them coming, just there, no foot traffic, no shopping cart. I said in a trembling voice, Sir?" The figure remained still. At first I assumed it might have been a customer. Although that area of the business was empty 99% of the time, we were still technically operating. "Hey sir," I gave it another go. He didn't answer, just got up slowly. He turned, and I realized it was not a man. It was an elderly woman, wearing what appeared to be a filthy coat over mismatched pajamas. She had matted, stringy hair. Her eyes appeared nearly empty, as if she wasn't paying much attention to me. Then she grinned. The smile wasn't your typical one. She had this big, toothy smile that made it seem like she was trying too hard to be amiable. My stomach turned over. "Any of the cheddar do you have? One's remaining?" Her tone was so casual that it made my skin crawl when she inquired. I stumbled. Yeah, I think they're middle freezer, bottom shelf." She didn't express gratitude to me, simply turned, opened the door, took out 3 pizza boxes, and held them close to her chest. "Marcus, Trina, someone's in frozen foods. A woman, can someone come here?" I said softly into my radio as I slowly retreated. No response. I turned around. As if she lived there, she was still crouching and searching through the freezer. Then behind me I heard another sound. When I turned back, I saw an older man with worn skin and a beard like a nest, carrying a partially consumed bag of chips when he emerged from the adjacent aisle. His voice was gruff as he said, "Where's the beer section?" With a dry tongue, I stated, "We don't sell alcohol at this location." With a grimace, he turned to face the storefront. "Y'all really need to restock better." I ran. I skipped the workplace. I made no attempt to contact a manager. I sprinted directly to the utility room used for employees, slammed the door closed, latched, and just for good measure, shoved a mop bucket in front. I took my phone out with trembling hands. I was kept on the line by the operator. I muttered, everything. The individuals, the way they had entered the building without anyone noticing, or worse, the fact that they had never departed. "Now I'm sending out officers," the operator promised. At that moment, the doorknob began to jiggle. It started out slowly before getting harder, and then shaking violently, as if someone were attempting to pull it off. I covered my mouth with my palm and hid behind cleaning supply shelves. The banging began. My heart pounded. I considered defending myself by snatching the metal mop handle. Then there was quiet. After a minute, I heard footsteps. Light ones, cautious ones, not heavy ones. They vanished after passing the door. Until the authorities showed up, I remained there. I was pale, sweating profusely, and still holding the mop handle like a weapon as I emerged. Marcus was conversing with a police officer. Trina was most likely on the phone. With corporation, the police. Radios hummed with conversation as I directed them toward the aisles and frozen items. They discovered the couple at the loading dock behind a locked maintenance door 15 minutes later. They weren't concealing. They were sleeping, wrapped in old coats, cardboard spread out on the floor, half-eaten packages and wrappers all around. As it happened, they had been residing there for more than a year. Through a forgotten panel behind the toy department, they were able to access their entire setup in the attic. They illegally connected a small space heater to the store's electricity, along with blankets and expired canned items. At night, when no one else was around, they had started slipping down to eat, steal, and sometimes take a bath in the staff restroom. I didn't pick up my last check or return the vest, and I quit the next morning. I simply left that building without turning around. I occasionally ponder what would have transpired if I hadn't spotted them that evening, or if I had gone straight to them. Were they only surviving, or would they have assaulted me? I'm not sure. All I know is that you begin to notice things after working the night shift for a while. Additionally, there are situations when it's best to avoid investigating the sounds in the attic, particularly if you might not like what you discover. Looking back, there were indications of a meltdown, but I didn't anticipate one in the middle of my shift. It was going to be another Monday night shift at the Springfield Walmart. Your feet hurt more from boredom than from movement during a routine, boring shift. For a year and a half or so, I had been working there mostly to save money for community college. By the cigarette counter and the red box kiosk that hadn't been in operation for months, my register was the second one from the end. Like clockwork, the regulars showed up. Construction workers getting energy drinks and medications. Mothers getting groceries. Retired people with coupons that matched their purchases. Nobody at work was close to me. Not at all. I kept to myself most of the time, but Jared, the floor manager, was pleasant enough and friendly when he had time. I arrived. I took a look. I returned home. Until Tricia entered the room, that was the plan. Naturally, I was unaware of her name at the time. She appeared to be just another consumer at first glance. Bright blue eyes that never seemed to blink, long artificial nails that tapped constantly on her phone screen, and painful-looking bleach blonde hair pushed back into a bun in her early 40s. She was dressed in bright pink leggings, an oversized hoodie with the sleeves rolled up, and a pocketbook that appeared to be big enough to hold a small child. She wasn't by herself. As though she owned the building, she was pulling her shopping cart, which was already half-loaded, with one hand while speaking into her Bluetooth headset. Not all of her words were clear to me. However, I managed to catch enough. And I swear if that says anything else about my attitude, no matter who she is, I don't care. Respect is something that people need to learn. Her cart was stopped in front of mine at Register 6. I looked at the clock, 7:48 p.m. Only 3 hours remain. I said, "Hi there," attempting to sound positive. "Did things go smoothly for you tonight?" At first, she just gazed at me like if I had interrupted a TED Talk without responding. She continued speaking into her earpiece after making the global shut-up gesture with her hand. She looked back at me and responded, "No, not you," after a moment. "Just this cashier." Then, as if I had been involved in the joke, she let out a big chuckle. I remained silent and began looking through her belongings. Shampoo, 2 Oreo packs, perfumed garbage bags, a few protein bars, and a ridiculous quantity of microwavable food. As if it were a legitimate document, she placed a folded coupon down on the belt. "That's supposed to be half off those bags," she added, gesturing to the coupon with a freshly painted nail. "Avoid making a mistake," I said. "You got it." She continued to shout loudly into her headset and began to rant about her ex-husband, gas prices, and a person named Amber, who seemed to have a boiled potato IQ. Then I noticed that the woman behind her, a weary-looking mother with 2 toddlers and a cart full of baby goods, sighed and whispered to herself. Tricia heard it, but it was very faint and inaudible. "You got something to say, sweetheart?" she virtually yelled as she turned her head around, Bluetooth now hanging from her ear. The mother appeared surprised. "No," I simply said. "No, you were acting a bit rudely." Tricia turned back to me after stopping herself in the middle of her sentence. "Do you think people today are real?" "Not a class." I didn't respond. All I wanted was for her to get out of my way. "Okay," I responded in a firm voice. "You have $34 in total." 54. She reached into her purse and produced a large bundle of crumpled cash, a few quarters, ones, and fives. She began counting, paused, and gave me a scowl. "You appear impatient." "No, ma'am," I said hastily. "Go slowly." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you certain of that?" I gave a nod. She gave the money to him. I gave her $540 and change after counting it. "Enjoy your evening," I said. "Whatever kind of night. I darn well want, I'll have it." She lost her temper. "Don't try to outwit me." She started to walk away but paused and turned back to face me. "Actually, you're kind of cute." I blinked. "Well, thank you. Are you up for going out sometime?" "I am in a relationship." Although it didn't reach her eyes, she grinned. Numbers. After that, she left. After 10 minutes, I heard yelling coming from the rear of the shop. I noticed Tricia and Jared bickering in front of the customer service desk as I peered over my register. something about being disregarded and treated with contempt. Then she took Jared by the arm. Calmly, he remarked, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to let go. You folks think you can ignore me. I put in exactly as much work as you do. More difficult. Do you hear me?" They called security. Clients began to record. She moved back in, the direction of the breathing heavily and looking about as if she were looking for a threat that didn't exist in the self-checkout area. She yelled, "You're going to learn today. I want to be respected. I'm worthy." Jared raised his hands. "All right, ma'am. Just take a moment to relax. The police will arrive shortly." She grabbed into her handbag at that moment. There was a scream. With my heart racing, I ducked behind my register. What she took out escaped my notice. Perhaps it was only a wallet. Pepper spray, perhaps, but it didn't matter at the time. They were in a panic. After 2 minutes, Officer Daniels and his partner hurried in with their hands ready but their pistols holstered. They came gently and gave calm, unambiguous orders. "Set down the bag, ma'am. Keep your distance from the counter," she shouted. "Not until someone respects me. Say it while on your knees." The location was frozen. Children were in tears. A bottle of bleach split open after rolling from a nearby shelf. My nose was burned by that odor. The officer said, "This is your final warning." She stepped forward. Press zap. She immediately slumped after the taser struck her mid-chest, jerking and screaming profanities until the officers handcuffed her. For a long time there was silence. They made the space clear. Jared made a declaration. "I told them what I saw when," they asked. "The harm was done, but no one was gravely injured. Tricia was accused of making terrorist threats, assault, and resisting arrest. In the last 6 months, she had apparently done this at 2 other stores. She shattered a manager's nose the last time, that I remained up late to assist with cleanup. I had to think about Jared's offer to let me go home. In the echo of what had just transpired, I had to stand silently. Because it wasn't the yelling, the taser, or even the threat that was the most frightening. It was the expression in her eyes, the notion that she owed the world something, the belief that her outburst made sense, and the dreadful idea that it might not end with a taser the next time. I never thought that a routine trip to Walmart would become an unforgettable horror. Everything began on a normal Saturday night in Riverbend, a little Tennessee city where I had recently moved and where everything was meant to feel familiar and safe, or at least predictable. I was still getting used to living in a much more tranquil environment after leaving Miami to start over. After years of an abusive relationship that had sapped my energy, it was meant to be a new beginning. New friends, a new job, and a new sense of independence, self-assurance, and faith in other people. In a weird way, my 24th birthday felt like a significant occasion. It made me realize how much I had lost too. The things I had previously taken for granted, such as my sense of security or self-worth, had vanished throughout the years I was in that unhealthy partnership. I was now attempting to gather the fragments. I didn't like the notion of taking self-defense classes or facing the world in my new, stronger physique, though, because some scars are deeper than skin. I still lacked complete self-assurance, and at times I felt like glass. But as my boyfriend Chris and I strolled through Walmart's aisles that night, all I wanted was to feel like a regular person once more. Even though our relationship had been going well for a few months, I was still plagued by memories of the past. After a day of hiking, we occasionally went shopping for a few sporadic necessities without even recognizing it. We would head to Walmart to return the iPhone cover that Chris had gotten me and pick up some supplies because it was the incorrect size. At approximately 9:30 p.m., we entered the store. Aside from a few other shoppers, the venue was nearly deserted, and the typical late-night ambiance made me feel strangely at ease. It was chilly in the evening, and I was still a little inebriated from the cocktails we had had together earlier in the day. Not enough to prevent me from working, but enough to divert my attention. I parted ways with Chris in the electronics section. I knelt down and looked through the many phone cases that were arranged on the shelf. As usual, Walmart's organization was disorganized, and in order to see the alternatives clearly, I had to bend over. I didn't give it much thought at the time. Not until I saw a man standing close by observing me. I wasn't too worried. People did, after all, examine items in stores. However, there was something about his expression, vacant, that triggered an odd warning in my head, almost frigid. I dismissed it. "Excuse me, can I grab one of those?" I pointed to an instance that caught my attention and asked nicely. The man's gaze remained unchanged despite his nod. An involuntary shudder went down my spine when I briefly saw his face, but I turned away and tried to keep my attention on the task at hand. Chris was still examining some game consoles down the aisle. I didn't give it much thought. The woman then appeared. She appeared suddenly, materialized, and stood directly behind me. I initially assumed she was simply another customer. However, I felt uneasy because she was standing so near to me while holding her 2 children, one of whom was in a stroller, and the other was no older than 5. I felt that my privacy had been violated, so I took an automatic retreat. I was surprised by her voice. "Whoa, it's been ages since I last saw you." She grabbed me by the arm and said, "Your hair looks amazing." I went cold. Do I know you?" With my heart pounding, I inquired. My hands started to perspire. I felt my stomach drop as she tightened her hold on my arm. Chris, taking note. "Hey, everything okay?" shouted from the opposite end of the aisle, expressing my trouble. The woman leaned in close, her breath nearly hot against my ear, before I could respond. "Come with me now, honey, you must trust me. This place is unsafe." I didn't comprehend. Nothing made sense to my brain as it tried to absorb what was happening. I had no excuse not to listen, but the woman's voice was too urgent and too calm. I turned to look at Chris, who had begun to approach me. I saw the concern in his eyes. He also didn't like what was going on. The woman took hold of my arm once more and held on to it. Her hold was tight, and my heartbeat accelerated. "Come now, please. You are being watched by 3 men. I could feel her eyes sweeping the store behind me, but the words hardly registered. There was no mistaking the difference in her tone. This wasn't some naive communication. There was a problem. She gently dragged me away from the electronics area where I had been, and past the infant clothes section. I ignored my brain's cries for me to run. Her composure gave me the impression that I had no other option. She murmured, "They've been following you for a while," as we moved aside. "When you were hunched over studying the cases earlier, one of them was photographing you." I felt a wave of nausea. My mind went into overdrive and my body became frigid. I was scarcely able to pay attention to what she said next. Everything seemed to be moving slowly because of the ringing in my ears. Not until I noticed the terror struck me hard when I saw the 2 men on the other side of the aisle approaching us. One of them, the man who had been standing close to me, I knew right away. He had a lower stature, a gloomy face, and intense eyes that made my skin crawl. The other man was about 6 feet tall. He had a strong physique and an air of coldness that was inappropriate for a public store. They were getting closer, and I was at a loss for what to do. My terror was broken by the woman's voice. She firmly said, "You need to get out of here, now." I didn't hold out for further directions. Hoping they wouldn't follow us, I spun around and headed straight for the closest checkout. I staggered a little as I looked over my shoulder and pushed past people in the aisles, my heart thumping in my chest. They were in pursuit. The security guards were visible to me close to the store's entrance. Right then, it was the only relief, I felt. Even though they weren't far behind, I felt somewhat safer because of the officers. I arrived at the self-checkout with tears in my eyes, my breath coming in short gasps and my heart pounding. However, they were there when I turned around. They stood there, both of them observing. I didn't think twice about it. I murmured to Chris, "Let's go now," and he was by my side in no time. There were no inquiries from him. We simply ran after he took my hand. We didn't stop until we were parked a few blocks away and safely in the car. The sensation that they had been too close persisted even after I felt like I could finally breathe. Too near to bringing about a change, sitting in solitude at a nearby drive-thru, it took us over an hour to relax. I kept playing it over and over, wondering what would have occurred if we hadn't escaped after everything that had transpired. Not knowing was the most difficult thing. The woman who saw what we hadn't and spared us was someone I never got to thank. She had the ability to see what I couldn't, and she moved swiftly to get me out of danger before it was too late. I still occasionally reflect on how close we came, and how easily things could have gone awry. Ever since, I always travel with a sense of alertness. You can never be too cautious or put too much faith in your environment. On the surface, the environment may appear serene, yet there may be much darker activity going on beneath the surface. I have no idea who those men were or why they were interested in me, but I'm positive that I wouldn't be sharing this tale now if it weren't for that stranger at Walmart. When I pulled into the almost deserted Walmart parking lot at 2:14 a.m., across abandoned shopping carts and oil slick stains that shimmered like ghosts in the tarmac, flickering shadows were created by the buzzing overhead lights. I'm Ryan, a 33-year-old recently unmarried, a wander on an emotional level. You get weird stuff from insomnia. Everything seems surreal during warp time, as if you're strolling through a dream that has been pieced together by cheesy fluorescent lights and restless thoughts. I had no specific reason for being here. Gum, perhaps. Perhaps it was simply an excuse to be somewhere other than my stuffy, gloomy apartment 5 minutes away. The idea of cinnamon buns pierced my thoughts like a splinter earlier that evening while I was browsing through cuisine videos on my phone. The fake vanilla icing and the soft dough, that brief feeling of warmth in a frigid environment. In a nutshell, it was comfort. And it seemed sufficient at 2:14 in the morning. The store was colder than I had anticipated. Not in a natural way. I shivered as an overly cold wind sliced through my hoodie. Somewhere above, a forgotten pop remix played, reverberating subtly like the soundtrack to a video game level you shouldn't be in yet. Only 2 others were present. The cashier and a heavyset man were looking at USB drives as if they were alien technology. Across the store, I caught a glimpse of him. With his fingers tapping the counter and a smile too big to be nice, he stood there at the sole open register. It wasn't a smile for customer service. Something else was involved. Like he had forgotten how real faces worked, forced and frozen. He was just as exhausted as the rest of us night creatures, I assured myself as I turned my head away. Aisle 4 is where I located the gum. Orbit spearmint, as usual. I put it in the pocket of my hoodie, and then stopped. Purchasing only gum felt too deliberate, as if I were feigning to have a purpose for being here at this hour. It was then that I recalled the cinnamon rolls. Pillsbury, blue label, refrigerated section D8 makes 8. I picked up the canister, with a sense of purpose as if it would satisfy a silent, painful void inside of me. Then I noticed the label, though. 5 to 6 people can be served. Too much for just one man. I couldn't decide, so I flipped it over in my hands, put it back, and picked it up again. I heard the voice at that moment. "Are you certain you only want that?" I pivoted. Only a few steps behind me, the cashier was still grinning. I leaped. "What?" "You seem to be thinking deeply," he added in a cool, dry voice. "Didn't mean to startle you." I chuckled uneasily. "Yeah, just watching my sugar lately." He gave a nod. Comprehensible, but occasionally self-care is worthwhile. It was the way he said it, not what he said. Too slick, too measured, too practiced. I looked away. "I'll give it some thought," he said, his tone softening. "You've already considered it. Just take what you want, perhaps." I didn't respond. I left a little more quickly than I had before. To collect my breath, I ducked into the bread aisle. Most likely, he was just doing his job and being courteous. Why had he followed me, though? All of that may have been uttered by him from the register. I felt suspicion nod. I returned to the refrigerated area after a full minute, picked up the cinnamon roll canister, threw it in my basket, and went to the register, but it was empty. The cashier had left. I looked around the shop. Quiet. "Did you then find what you were trying to locate?" It was the voice behind me once more. I turned around. He was just a few inches away, grinning. Just there, no sound, no footsteps. I flinched. "Man, you keep sneaking up on me." He cocked his head, his smile unwavering. "You looked like someone who needed help." "I'm good," I said. "Just need to check out." He looked at my basket below. Those large ones? Extra frosting? I gave a nervous nod. You made a good choice, he muttered. Then he moved back behind the counter as if nothing had happened. I gave my card a tap. Just a lengthy pause. No swipe glitch, no chip issue. Too long, he remarked almost derisively. The system must be slow. The screen of the register flickered. Above, the lights hummed. Something cried out from deep within me. Lee. I put the basket down and said, I'll just come back tomorrow. He didn't blink his eyes. You've made up your mind, sir. I took a step back, then took off. The doors leading out would not open. I hurriedly waved my hands. Nothing. Slow footsteps on tile behind me. Don't touch the glass, please, sir. You shouldn't be hurt right now, would you? I pivoted. Man, get out of here. I'm not sure what your problem is. He said, You know exactly what I want. I ran away, past the pharmacy, past the refrigerated meats, along the aisles. I didn't stop even when my ankle twisted. Towers of bulk. Toilet paper served as my hiding place. Then there was silence. Ryan. My name. I kept my name a secret from him. He spoke as though he had known it for a longer time than I had, as if he remembered it. You came here because you needed something, he stated with a gentle tone. However, those weren't cinnamon rolls, were they? I slithered over to the garden center's exit and pushed the locked doors. I pounded on the window pane. Another man, wearing the same uniform and grinning, is standing outside watching, expressionless like a reflection, ready to come to life. The first voice behind me once more. It has nothing to do with the store. It's all about you. I pivoted. Why me? What are you looking for? His smile got bigger. We see people like you floating aimlessly, hoping that sugar will fill the voids left by despair. But you hesitated, and that uncertainty draws us in. He extracted the smashed canister, the same one I had picked up, from his vest pocket. It was leaking. He let it fall. At my feet, it exploded. My sneakers were covered with thick, gooey muck. There was a pulse inside. I took off running. Gasping, he hobbled. Back to the front. The register wavered. The message on the screen said, Approved. Across the intercom, a quiet voice crackled. We hope you were able to find what you were looking for, Ryan. Come back soon. The doors opened with a hiss. I continued. I ran into the darkness. I continued until I was shut in my car, gasping for air and trembling. Like nothing ever happens, Walmart stood behind me as if nothing had happened. However, I am more knowledgeable. I haven't returned. I haven't had much sleep either. I still have the cinnamon roll canister in my refrigerator, leaking and waiting. That night I didn't get any sleep, not at all. I simply closed my eyes. I gazed into the shadows beneath my eyelids. The panic from that location is still echoed by the heart. By morning, I had persuaded myself that it was stress, a nightmare that woke me up, or even a breakdown. Isn't it strange how people break? I informed my pal Mark over the phone. I didn't feel well. He extended an invitation to visit. No, I replied. I opened the refrigerator at lunchtime. The canister remained, but it was now swollen and protruding as if something were inside of. It was attempting to escape. It was encircled by a viscous syrup that was leaking from crevices I didn't recall seeing the night before. The Pillsbury label was ripped and smudged, as if it had been pulled apart by claw marks. I picked up a garbage bag, wrapped it through 3 times, and tossed it in the outdoor trash can. It returned by sunset. The same ooze, the same place, as if it had never been gone. I heard someone tapping in the kitchen that evening. Slow, steady, like the sound of fingers tapping the refrigerator door. I remained in bed. I tried burning it the following day. Took it to a vacant lot. Everything. Lighter fluid, gasoline, etc. It didn't catch fire. It let out a brief scream, like air escaping a pressurized tank but alive. It has a high-pitched, whine-like sound. Long after the canister had ceased to move, it continued to reverberate in my brain. Then, For a brief moment, I noticed the smile mirrored in my car window, his grin, the cashier's. That night, I went out of town, packed a bag, kept it a secret, from motel to motel. Only cash, no credit cards. I never spend more than 2 days in one place. However, Walmart is always open and well lit wherever I go. Additionally, I swear that occasionally when I pass by, late at night I see he was waiting, still grinning by the window. And since the cinnamon rolls are still inside of me and are now hungry, I know that I will have to return someday. When someone were up to not good, my mom used to call it that. She used to say idle hands are the devil's playground, particularly when she saw me messaging boys beneath the dinner table or my brother slinking out. I didn't give that much thought. That is until the late spring of 2017, when a pleasant afternoon nearly devolved into something I would rather not even consider. At the time, I was 20 years old. In Washington, I resided in a medium-sized city. It was a place that appeared prettier than it actually was, so let's call it North Willow. In fact, there are strip malls, an increase in crime, and meth heads hanging out in gas station parking lots. But there are mountains in the distance and pines on the horizon. Lena is a new acquaintance that I recently made. She was 22 and had my caustic, sardonic sense of humor because of our shared piercings, long black hair, and propensity to wear black clothing from thrift stores. Strangers assumed we were sisters or even twins. All we'd known, we spent a few months together, but we still got together occasionally. It was one of those friendships that formed quickly because you clicked. It was warm that day, maybe in the mid-60s, but a little gloomy. We had been browsing through old books at her kitchen table and relaxing in her flat, half watching Chopped reruns. "Hey, would you mind driving me to Binstone Walmart?" she then inquired. "The one off Argus Highway is that one." My nose furrowed. "That one? That guy tried to sell phony iPhones out of a stroller, isn't that right?" She chuckled. "Yes, most likely. However, my girl is employed there today. I promised to stop by for a smoke because she's on break in 15 minutes. Sam, Lena's girlfriend, was employed at that Walmart, was located in North Willow's rougher area. That was the first time I'd ever gone there. That side of town was always a little strange. Not simply dilapidated structures and dubious 7-Elevens. You had the uneasy feeling that you were being observed all the time. But I did say yes. I assumed that it would be a quick errand to pass the time. However, this strange uneasiness crept into my chest as I backed out of her driveway, pressing down slowly just below my collarbone. "You good?" Lena looked over and inquired. "Yeah, just got a weird feeling." "Maybe it's gas," I uttered while suppressing my laughter. She smirked and reached for her vaporizer, saying, "That's really cute." However, it wasn't nerves or gas. I was aware that it wasn't. Something else was involved. Something I was still unable to identify. For a weekday afternoon, the Binstone Walmart parking lot was surprisingly full. Since every nearby site was taken, we parked further out. I saw a beaten silver vehicle parked strangely at the front as we made our way to the door, hood up. There were 3 men gathered around it. Everyone in their late teens or early 20s was leaning against the automobile as if they were posing for an unnoticed photo. It wasn't a catcall. They remained silent. They simply gazed intently. The kind of glance that makes your skin crawl, as if they were staring through you instead of at you. I pushed Alina. "Do you see that?" "Yes." She told me to ignore it. Low, but there was a slight shift in her posture. She reached into her coat pocket as if to retrieve her pepper spray. We entered the store after passing them. Sam was inside, next to the customer service counter. We all returned outside to the smoking area next to the garden center exit when she smiled at seeing us. I continued to glance over my shoulder. There were still the guys standing around the car with the popped hood. They appeared calm, rather, than irritated or agitated. Too composed for 3 men who are allegedly having car problems. People continued to pause and provide assistance. A man in a delivery van, elderly couples, or even a Walmart clerk pushing trolleys. "Nah," one of the boys said. "Our buddy's on the way with cables." The same response each time, but the hood never lowered. Our smokes were spent. Sam bid Lena farewell with a hug before returning inside. For a moment, Lena and I stood close to the exit, discussing our next course of action. The tall, clean-cut, somewhat frat boy-looking guy who had been standing in the center of the lot began to approach us slowly as we were making our way back to my car. Simply with assurance. "Hey," he exclaimed with a smile. "You two got jumper cables?" Slowly, I nodded. "I have some in my trunk, yes. Do you want me to drive around?" "No," he continued, glancing directly at me. "How about I just accompany you? To the car, I'll show you the location." My stomach turned. I gazed at him. I stated quite bluntly, "I know where it's at. It's right there in the front row." Once more, his smile was too broad, as if he wasn't even attempting to conceal the game he was playing. Beside me, Lena was stony-faced. He made another attempt. "Yes, but I could give you directions as you approach via car. Make it simpler." "Thank you, but no, I'm doing fine." As we walked, he kept up with us. "It's a long walk for me, so hurry up. In any case, you'll arrive more quickly." Now my heart was thumping. My automobile was almost here. It was parked in a silent row at the far end of the lot. No witnesses, no persons nearby. I paused and pivoted. "Look, dude, I'll assist you, but you won't get inside my car." He hesitated. For a moment his face transformed as if the mask had fallen off. Irritation, disappointment, and a chill. Muttering, "Fine," he took a step back. We secured the doors and got into my car. "What the hell was that?" With trembling hands, Lena muttered, "I'm not sure, but I believe we should continue to drive in front. Only from afar." After starting the vehicle, we parked in the row next to the front. My blood froze at what we witnessed. Back toward the silver automobile, the man who had approached us was sprinting. The other two smashed the hood as he arrived. Closed, hopped inside, and turned on the engine. They left the parking lot by peeling. No jumper cables, no difficulty starting it, nothing. Simply disappeared. I parked in a different area, shuddering. Sweat had made my hands slippery. I attempted to phone my lover, no response. "Should we call the cops?" Lena inquired. I gazed at my mobile device. I desired to. My entire being begged me to, but I chose not to. I have no idea why. Perhaps I convinced myself that nothing significant occurred. I regret it, even if I may not have wanted to be dramatic. A few weeks later, Lena's roommate and I were watching the news. There was a part. "Tonight, the Bryanstone Walmart is being investigated for an abduction attempt. In the parking area, 2 women were approached by the suspects dressed as stranded drivers. Before the cops arrived, the suspects ran away. There have been no arrests." I sat still. Lena's jaw dropped. "That was them," I said to myself. "They were that. I no longer visit that area of town. If I take my fiancé with me when I go to a Walmart. Additionally, I will never again provide assistance to someone in a parking lot. Because evil isn't always represented by a spooky old man wearing a trench coat. At times it appears to be a dapper man with a lovely grin. At times it waits for you to roll down your window while standing 15 feet away from the entrance. Hands that are not moving. I now understand my mother's meaning. That night I didn't even want to go out. The day had been exhausting, humid, and still hot. The kind of July heat from the south that makes you perspire just to get to the mailbox. 2 months prior, I had finally received my diploma. I was also in that strange transitional period between adolescence and adulthood, where you're theoretically free but still living with your mother, as I hadn't started any studies or had a job yet. Lena arrived at approximately 9:00 p.m. One of my best friends was a little older than me. She was already 19 years old, had a beat-up Corolla of her own, and frequently showed up without warning. We ought to strike Brent's, for she flopped onto my bed and muttered, "Snacks or something." "I need trash bags anyway." I looked at her. "You needed garbage bags, so you drove all the way over here." "No," she grinned. "You're not bothersome, and I came over because I'm bored. Trash bags are typically used as an excuse. Even though I joked, I half expecting my mom to say no when I asked if we might make a quick trip to Walmart. Her eyes furrowed, but she replied yes, which surprised me. Only there and back. Technically speaking, you are both now adults, but it doesn't make you unbeatable. Keep yourself safe. We agreed. We meant it. Walmart at night is strange, just wrong, but not dangerous looking. The bright lights seem to be working too hard as they hum. People there feel either too quiet or overly crowded, and the aisles are only partially stocked. Loud. Despite the fact that the horticultural center was closed, Lena parked close by. It was less crowded, she shrugged. Almost quickly, we located the trash bags inside. However, rather than checking out, we ended ourselves conversing, joking, and passing time while perusing the beauty section, the seasonal items, and eventually the electronics section. I didn't notice Lena becoming silent until we were in line to check out. Her words was barely heard as she drew closer. Is that person by self-check-out someone you see? I looked over. A man wearing a simple black sweatshirt stood next to the soda coolers, perhaps loitering there. I gave a shrug. How about him? He said hello. To me in the cleaning aisle earlier. So I'm not sure. It was just strange. He didn't think it was enough for someone to be kind. I looked back. Now he was looking directly at us, neither blinking nor smiling. A shiver went up my back. We swiftly made our payment and left, bags for trash with the receipt in the other hand. With the exception of a few straggling automobiles and the typical staff cars near the loading docks, the parking lot appeared to be largely deserted. Then, 2 seats over, we noticed the hoodie guy standing behind a beaten-up silver vehicle. Now he was not alone. 2 other males were there, one resting against the trunk smoking, the other tall and bald and wearing a basketball jersey. Lena's automobile beeped softly as she unlocked it. Don't enter just yet, she said. We pretended to check on her while we stood by the car doors. Telephone. The 3 men continued to look over, whisper, and chuckle. I whispered, let's just wait till they leave. However, they chose to get into the car, pull out, and then slowly drive around the lot rather than departing. They rolled down the windows just enough to let light in as they went by us. A single one licked his lips. Something was mouthed by the person wearing the hoodie. What I didn't want to know. Lena didn't. Don't wait any longer. The tires screeched, a little as we rushed for the exit after she wrenched open the driver's door and tossed the trash bags in the back. We were gone in a matter of seconds. The silver sedan, however, came next. I said, they're behind us, in a strained voice. No. We were traveling down Brenner Road, a 2-lane route with only a few dilapidated businesses and a single blinking traffic signal that runs through the center of town. I looked back, and it was still there. I said, they're speeding up. With them behind us, I won't be returning home. Lena's voice broke, but she held the wheel tightly. I will not allow them to see my residence. We hit a 35 and a 60. We were matched. With my heart pounding, I said, try to lose them. Simply drive. She turned right onto a residential street called Sutter Lane. Then another turn, then another. Still present. One time they sped forward. I'm not sure how, but it went by us on the left. One guy, smiling and waving as if we were playing a game, was hanging halfway out the window. Then they cut ahead of us, went into a deserted church parking lot, whirled around, and came up just behind us once more. Trying not to cry was my goal. Yes, I was. I checked my phone and remarked, we need somewhere public. Somewhere there are people. Lena abruptly veered to the left on Decline Drive and exclaimed, store. Uncle Roy's is that strange little place. It's open late but doesn't have gas. It was a small, unassuming shop where customers purchased cigarettes, lottery tickets, and there were people and lights, but the energy drinks were half expired. She simply sped into the lot, turned toward the back, and placed it in park behind the building without even properly parking. Outside, a man was piling empty cartons at the rear entrance. We're being followed, Lena said. Yelled, please, please help. He turned to face us after dropping the crates, looking serious right away. Come inside now. Uncle Roy's inside smelt like stale donuts and floor cleanser. We separated and ducked in through the back. I jumped behind one of the freezers by the wall of alcoholic beverages. Lena ducked behind the deli counter and headed to the left. A young Hispanic woman was employed at the deli, perhaps 22, who didn't even blink when Lena knelt next to her. When she saw Lena's terrified gaze, she calmly nodded once. Boots on linoleum, the front door chime chimed outside. I didn't breathe. Wandering the aisles in search of beer was one of the guys wearing the jersey. Footsteps, I heard him say to someone, slowly approaching. At the booze section, he stopped. Behind me, I could hear the freezer's gentle buzz. I can feel my jeans getting colder. Said, "Hey, you seen two girls come in?" It was the worker, the man from outside. Slow, calm voice. "They are indeed my nieces. They are returning the favor." A pause. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely." One more pause. Then there were retreating footsteps. Once more, the door chimed. Until the rear worker returned and waved us out, we remained motionless. He said, "They're gone." I told them that I was related. They quickly retreated. My legs trembled. I was scarcely able to stand. The deli A worker emerged and handed us water bottles. "They're always in here," she uttered in a hushed voice. "Talking all the time unpleasant. I comprehend them even if you don't think so." We remained for 15 more minutes, simply drinking water, pacing, and attempting to keep from collapsing. Lena attempted to contact her boyfriend, hands shaking. I was afraid they may be waiting around the corner, so I just stood there and watched the darkness outside. Finally, in silence and trepidation, we drove back to my place. We kept my mother in the dark about what actually took place. Claimed that we got distracted while conversing and collided with traffic. However, for days thereafter, I continued to review my shoulder. I couldn't stop wondering what would have happened if we hadn't visited that shop, had the employees not been there. I never returned to that Walmart, not after that, as occasionally monsters and eerie houses don't resemble horror. It occasionally drives a battered automobile, sports a hoodie, and follows you home. And trash bags were all you wanted.